I'm not gonna lie, I did not love hearing Robb Stark, the King of the North, say, "I love you, Sersi." Hey everyone, this is David Stark from Watcher Pass, and it's a new Marvel movie day. We have Eternals now in theaters on November 5th, 2021. It is a long one. It is a 157-minute epic that goes through all of human history following these god things. We'll talk more about it in a little bit, but first thing I want to tell you is there will be spoilers in this review. I'm going to talk about things I liked about the film, things I didn't like about the film, and then go into the ending. So if you haven't seen the movie, buckle up, get some caffeine, get some snacks, go watch it. It is a long one, and you can come back and watch the review. Or if you don't care, you want to know what happens, you're just curious, let's keep going. So the Eternals follows this group of we find out later that they're kind of like rope, they're like engineered creatures, but at the start they seem like gods. They live in this kind of cloaked spaceship, and they're there to protect humanity from something called the deviants, which are these like sinewy dog-like creatures that can basically kill things pretty quickly. They have some tentacles occasionally, and some of that sometimes they fly, but they are very ruthless. Think like the enemies from Edge of Tomorrow, or I guess whatever they called it after Live, Die, Repeat. Think like that, just kind of ruthless, evil creatures that attack humans, and so the Eternals are there to stop them. And they've been hunting these monsters throughout time, and eventually they succeed in their goal, but they still haven't been called back. They were sent there by some celestial being Arsham to get rid of the deviants, and eventually when they're done, they don't get any new information, so they live on Earth for a while until the events of this movie bring some deviants back, and also some long held celestial plots come to be. So things I liked about this film. The first is the cast. I mean, this is both a great cast overall, and it's a good, diverse cast. I mean, I love that they're just a giant chunk of actors that are awesome, because it seems like Marvel's just trying to get everyone into their fold. Like everyone has to have a Marvel role, and in this one they add like 10 more well-known actors. But on top of the good cast, I loved that this was such a diverse, interesting cast of characters. You had a good number of female, I'm going to call them superheroes. They're not superheroes. They're these kind of engineered creations that have kind of superhero like powers. They're not cyborgs because they're not necessarily machines, but they're kind of a hybrid, somewhere in between. But I'm just going to call them superheroes. You had like a good number of female superheroes. You had diverse members of these superheroes. You had a variety of races represented in Eternals. You had LGBTQ Eternal. You also had a deaf Eternal who was actually played by a deaf actor, which I loved. If you follow the channel, I interviewed the folks of Coda, which is one of my favorite movies of this year, and they kept talking about how deaf characters should be played by deaf actors. And so when I saw that this character was deaf, I made it a point to look up, and she actually is a deaf actor. And so I thought that was really great. And they adjusted the story, or at least they worked the story around so it didn't become like a hindrance to her. Like all the Eternals, they've all been together for millennia, so they all speak various languages. They all could sign to her. They could all communicate pretty seamlessly, and I love that it just kind of went. They didn't bring it up. It just kind of was how it was, and they used different ways to communicate, but they didn't draw attention to it. So overall, I love this cast. This cast was fantastic. So the second thing I loved are the effects. You expect great effects from a Marvel movie, and this one is no different. You have this epic movie about these creatures, these guardians that are celestial. Essentially, they span millennia. They have these cosmic battles, and so you would expect some really good effects. And this is no different. This movie is no slouch. There are some really amazing effects. There's some world-shattering type instances that happen. There are some pretty epic fights that involve superpowers and flight and super creatures and just destruction all around. It's a treat to see in theaters. And also in theaters, you get the benefit of the third thing I like. You get really amazing sound. This film has great sound to go along with the great effects, because you have these epic battles, these celestial events that cause cities to rumble and cause things to destroy. And this is probably because I saw it in a theater that had rumble seats, but it was pretty amazing because when a big event happened, the seats were rumbling, the sound was filling the theater. It was a treat to be back in theaters, and it was a really cool thing to experience. So, things I didn't love about this film. The length. This movie is long and it feels long. It's a 157-minute movie, so 2 hours and 37 minutes. And it feels every one of those 237 minutes. I actually kind of think that this film should have been broken up. And I wonder if it was originally going to be kind of a two-parter and they stitched together for some reason, because it felt like this movie had too much going on. You had the entire backstory of the Eternals, which spans 7,000 years, I believe. It was some insane amount of time. And they don't show everything, but you get a sense of history through the film. And then you have the current plot, the current crisis that they have to go through. There's some intrigue there. There are two major enemies that they have to fight. Like, there's just a lot going on in this movie, and I think it might have been better to break it up into two parts. The first part that kind of deals with the past and how they got to where they were, and also to fight the main deviants, because that could be a plot of its own. And then after that movie, part one's over. They kill the last deviant. And then they find out the twist that you find out halfway through the movie, which I'll go into towards the ending, and then you find out the twist that Ikaris is actually the bad guy. And movie one. Movie two is them trying to, their first fight against Ikaris and then trying to figure out how to stop the emergence. I think that would have been better. I think it would have been better for everyone, because then you could have gotten a little bit more of the temporal plot, and the deviants could have actually felt like a solid threat, and then you could have had a little bit more with their own internal fighting. So I don't know, it felt very long. So I don't know, it felt very long. I didn't love it, but it is what it is. I guess you get your money's worth if you go to the theaters. Hey, price performance, you can't beat this. The second thing I didn't love are the deviants, and this is just kind of, I don't love when the enemy is almost like mindless. Now, they kind of tried to solve that by having one of the deviants evolve into this, I guess, more powerful creature, but then they didn't use it. Like they had this whole subplot where he was draining powers from the Eternals to become more powerful, and then they just didn't. He almost was uneventful. Like when he finally came to fight, he just kind of died. Like, he put up a fight, but it was a very short fight, and he was killed by Thena. It didn't feel epic. It didn't feel powerful. And then he was the only one that had any sort of interesting aspects. He could talk, he could reason, whatever. The other deviants were just essentially mindless animals. Like, they were essentially dogs that tried to hunt the Eternals. And that just doesn't give me the kind of, I guess, fear that you would expect from like a team of supervillains or something that can actually reason. It's kind of like if you've seen the Tomorrow War, there's this big buildup to, we're going to go and take on this army in the future, and then you get there and it's just essentially, it's like animals, and you're like, okay, that doesn't strike fear. They don't seem very coordinated. It just seems like a mass. And that's kind of what this felt. There weren't like a million deviants, but they just didn't have any sort of nuance. A couple of them had different powers, but overall it was just essentially animals that they were fighting, and that doesn't really make me excited. And the last thing I didn't love is the ending, and let's go into the ending, and it's a long one, so apologies for this. I tried to condense it down. I do talk a lot. I will try to speed through it because I know it's a long ending, but I'm also going to try to make sure to hit all the main points. But so let's get into the ending. So I've kind of talked about some of the things in my things I didn't like about the film, but you find out in the movie about, I don't know, an hour in, I guess that's a third, that Eternals are sent to planets that are hosting these celestial creatures. I think they're called Celestials. They're like giant world creating, galaxy creating entities that incubate in a planet's core. They get sent into a planet, and that's where they grow. And essentially they are there until the planet has enough life or energy from the life to then allow that celestial to emerge. And it's called the emergence. And once that happens, that planet is destroyed, but then you have a celestial that can create a star and create galaxies. And so from that one planet's death, you'll have billions of other lives that are created. So it's kind of like a greater good type argument. We also find out that the deviants were sent by Arasham, which is this main celestial. He's kind of controlling where the celestials are incubating, and then also he sends deviants there to get rid of the predators on that planet so that life can thrive. And he sends Eternals there to then take out the deviants. We found out that the Eternals were created because essentially originally it was just deviants going in and taking out the predators. But then there was a flaw in their program, and the deviants didn't stop just killing the predators. They would start trying to kill the new life that happened. And so Eternals were created to go to that planet, take out the deviants, and then monitor it to allow life to flourish, eventually to then just get sucked into this emergence. So we also find out that Ajak, I think her name is Ajak. Ajak? I think it was Ajak. Salma Hayek's character. I'm going to call her Salma Hayek. Salma Hayek's character found this out and was trying to stop the emergence. And Ikaris, who's played by Rob Stark, he also learned this earlier, and it had been weighing on him. And so he wanted to keep the emergence going. Salma Hayek's character wanted to stop the emergence, so he ended up killing Salma Hayek's character. He killed her by essentially feeding her to some deviants that emerged. They were, I guess, encased in ice, and then as the ice was melting, some new deviants came. So Ikaris fed Salma Hayek's character to the deviants, who killed her, and then the like deviant prime, the main deviant, when it killed her, it like devoured some of her power, and then that caused it to change a little bit, evolve, get a little bit more, get a little bit more conscious. And it also gave some powers to the other deviants, so they became a little bit more interesting. One like grew wings, one grew like tentacles, and so again, like I thought, okay, this is cool, like these deviants might be interesting, but they're not. They're just essentially the same, except they have a little bit different power. We learned this partway through the movie, and then the Eternals, the remaining Eternals, because Ikaris is now bad, try to figure out how to stop the emergence. And they come up with this kind of Captain Planet type scenario where they're going to combine their powers into a Ultramind, and then Druig, who's played by Barry Keoghan, who I love. Barry Keoghan, he's awesome. I'll see him in everything. He was going to use his mind control powers to try to stop Tiamat. Tiamat is the celestial that is emerging from the Earth. So they're on their Eternal ship, and they're trying to craft these Captain Planet, like, they're not rings, but they might as well be rings. Like they're trying to craft Captain Planet bracelets, and Ikaris attacks the ship and destroys those bracelets, and essentially stops their plan. He doesn't kill any of them, but he destroys their bracelets and says they can't stop the emergence, and then asks if anyone wants to go with him. And Sprite decides to go with him because she's in love with him. And after this, after he leaves, they're kind of stuck. They're wondering what to do. And Kingo, who's played by Kumail Nanjiani, also decides to leave. He actually thinks that they should follow the emergency. He actually kind of wants to follow Ikaris. He's always followed Ikaris, and so he trusts in Ikaris's judgment, but he's not going to stop the Eternals from trying to stop the emergence, but he doesn't want to participate in it, so he leaves as well. So now they're kind of left to figure out what to do. How can they get their Captain Planet Ultramind back? And very conveniently, there's this like ball in Sersi that looks kind of like a golden snitch, but it lives in her throat, that she can use to communicate with Arsham. And Phastos pulls that out of her and like takes it apart. It's like, oh, we can use this conveniently. That's right here. So he uses that to craft their Captain Planet bracelets. So Tiamat starts to emerge, and we find out that he's emerging in the Indian Ocean. So the Eternals all go to try to stop it. But when they get there and they try to start using their Captain Planet power, who should show up but Ikaris? Ikaris comes and tries to attack them. And what he ends up doing, actually, is he essentially tries to kill Druig. And he picks him up, and he just like laser shoots him from his eyes into the ground and essentially tries to kill him. I don't know how he doesn't, because it looks like a pretty painful fall, and Druig isn't like super powerful, but it's fine. After this, Sersi says that she's going to go try to stop Tiamat anyways. So she goes, and the other Eternals, which is Phastos, Makkari, Thena, they're the ones that are left. They stay and fight Ikaris. And this is where Phastos finally gets his chance to shine. He doesn't get much of a role, but now he uses his technical powers to kind of try to try to restrain Ikaris. So Sersi goes out to try to stop Tiamat, and Tiamat's starting to emerge. You see these like gold like finger tendrils like come up from the earth, and you see like a face looking thing start to emerge. And so Sersi is getting ready to stop Tiamat, but then she sees a vision of Salma Hayek's character, Ajak. I'm gonna say I want to call it Ayak because of Ayak. So I'm just gonna call it Salma Hayek's character. She's up watching her and basically tells Sersi, like, you can't do this, you're not powerful enough. And Sersi then says, like, stop it, Sprite. Sprite has like holographic power. She can like make illusions pop up. So she's distracted, and Sprite stabs her in the side. So she doesn't kill her, but she does, stab through her side. I think she's trying to incapacitate her. And then she like plays essentially a shell game and creates multiple mountains, because Tiamat's emerging from mountain, to make it difficult to figure out where Tiamat's emerging. And you're like, oh no, what's going to happen? And then Druig just goes and clocks her in the back of the head. She goes down. All the illusions are dropped, and Sersi's fine. Well, Sersi, I mean, she has a knife in her, but she gets rid of that. It's fine. So over on the beach, they're trying to stop Ikaris. They're fighting Ikaris. And it looks like they're doing a decent job. And then the super deviant shows up, and he starts to fight as well. And he starts to fight Ikaris, but he also fights the Eternal. So essentially, it breaks up now into two fights. You've got Phastos and Makkari fighting Ikaris, and then you have Thena fighting the super deviant. And so on the Phastos and Makkari side, they end up restraining Ikaris with like a series of restraints that Phastos creates from thin air. So they get him down, they stop him. On the Thena side, they have a pretty okay fight, and then the deviant tries to use Gilgamesh, who was Thena's lover. The deviant had previously absorbed Gilgamesh, so he absorbed Salma Hayek's character and he got healing powers, and then he absorbed Gilgamesh and got like One Punch Man super fist powers. And so, but he also has their memories, and so he tries to use the memories and the voice to distract Thena to then absorb her power. And it looks like it's going to work, but then when he gets close, he's like puts the tendrils into her to start to absorb her, and then she just goes crazy, like she just slashes him and kills him. So again, I didn't love that, because it's such a big character that's kind of built up through this, and then she just kills him pretty easily. Like I was expecting a bigger fight, or at least maybe a fight focused on him and the different powers that he has, rather than just okay, he's got those powers, what do you do? Oh, we're just gonna slash him, he's dead, he's done. It seemed too convenient. Anyways, over on the Sersi side, she gets to where Tiamat is emerging and starts to use her power, which she can convert matter into other matter. And so she starts to use the power to try to convert Tiamat into like a statue, essentially. And she starts doing it, but Ikaris, who's constrained, breaks free and goes to try to stop Sersi. Now, unfortunately for Ikaris, when he gets there, he can't do it. He tries to stop her, but then he kind of remembers all the good times. They were married, they had a good life, but then once Ikaris learned kind of the fate of the world from Salma Hayek's character, he couldn't handle it. He couldn't handle not telling her, so he distanced himself. But he still loved her, and so instead of stopping her, he just kind of says that she can go. Like he doesn't actually kill her. And so then she tries to stop Tiamat again, and this time the Captain Planet thing happens. Somehow, we don't know how, but it takes her, it takes all the Eternals. So it takes even the ones that don't have the bracelets. So Ikaris is bound, and Sprite is bound, and theoretically Kingo is bound, but we don't see him. And so they come together and they stop Tiamat, and Tiamat turns to marble. Ta-da! Everything's fine. Ikaris is pretty sad about that. Like Ikaris is sad about what he did. Like I think he's happy now that it's over, and so he flies in the sun and kills himself. We think maybe he's still alive. I don't know. Maybe he can survive that. I'm not sure. It was kind of a nice, Ikaris metaphor, but it also seemed weird that he would just kill himself rather than try to help and redeem himself from what he did. We go back to the Eternals who are there, and we find out Sersi explains that when she touched Tiamat, she found out that they were all linked to Tiamat. They all had like similar energy. And so that is how she was able to make the Captain Planet Ultramind without the bracelets, like because since they were all connected through Tiamat, she was able to connect everyone through that and combine their powers. And she was able to actually draw on Tiamat's energy as well to then convert it to stone. But that's also how the Eternals had survived previous world destruction events, because they had been tied to the Celestials that were emerging. So when the Celestial emerged, their energies were all tied together, and so they didn't die. They then were sent back to Arasham to get their memories wiped and then go to a new planet. But this time they didn't, because they stopped the emergence. And Sersi also tells Sprite that she has a little bit of power left and she can make Sprite into a real girl, just like, just like a Pinocchio scene. Sprite has had a tough time because she has been I don't know. I don't know how old she is, but let's say kind of a teenager, maybe a young adult teenager for 7,000 years, which isn't great. So she really just wants to have a life. She wants to grow up, have a family, just experience what the other Eternals have, but she hasn't been able to because she's been stuck in this body. Kind of like what happened in Interview with the Vampire with the child vampire. Similar idea. And so Sersi turns her into a real girl. So fast forward, everything seems fine. We find out that Thena, Druig, and Makkari they can't stick around and do nothing. They can't stay on Earth. They don't really have much tying them to Earth. So they get on the Eternals ship and fly out into the space, and they're going to go find other Eternals to educate them on what's happening and try to stop more emergences. And then the ones that are left, you got Phastos, Kingo, Sersi, and Sprite, who's now a real girl, so she's probably not going to be part of the Eternal conversation anymore. So essentially you have Phastos, Sersi, and Kingo. They're back. They start to try to redo their normal life. They try to reintegrate into society, and there's this new world, and everything seems fine until Arasham emerges. He comes to Earth. He confines them with his gold ring power. He confines them and pulls them up to him, and basically is like, you succeed in stopping the emergence. I will not pass judgment on Earth today, but you're coming with me. I'm going to evaluate your memories, and Earth's fate will be determined based on your memories of your memories of Earth. And so essentially he's going to return later to pass judgment if needed. And so then he takes them to presumably back to his celestial workshop, and it's over. Movie's done. But it's a Marvel movie, so there is a stinger. And in the stinger, you see the Eternals that left. You see Thena, Makkari, and Druig on their plane, and they're essentially complaining like, we haven't heard from the Earth squad in a week. Something must have happened. And then you get some strange cosmic teleportation onto the ship, and who should emerge but another Eternal named Eros, who's played by Harry Styles. He essentially says, your friends are in trouble, let's go stop them. So it looks like maybe there's other Eternals that have also rebelled against Arasham, and maybe now we'll see who those are. And that's it, right? No, it's a Marvel movie. There's another stinger. Right at the very end, you get a super stinger, and we see Dane, who is Sersi's human boyfriend. Like, he was human, Sersi's Eternal. They were together. They were having, she was having concerns because she's going to live forever. He's not. But we see Dane. He was trying to tell her something about his life before she was kidnapped by Arasham. So now we see him. I think he's in her office, although maybe he's in his office. And he's looking at this sword that looks like Excalibur when they showed it, but I'm not certain if it was Excalibur. And it's kind of reacting to him. The blade, like there's a texture on the blade that's kind of following him, and you can read this like ancient text on the blade. He's about to touch it when you hear a voice from behind him. You don't see who's saying it, but you hear a voice from behind him that says, "You see, you're ready for that, Mr. Whitman." And so we find out that this is Dane Whitman, who is the Black Knight. And I had to look that up because I don't know who the Black Knight is, but I looked it up. Apparently it's another Marvel hero. I assume he'll be part of this future, this next phase in the Marvel movies. And there you go. That's Eternals. Overall, I mean, I liked lots about it. I thought it was way too long, and I thought it was a little bit convoluted. Like, having all that story in one movie felt too much. And also, I didn't really love the enemy characters. So I think ultimately it's a rental, especially because of the length. Like, you're going to want to watch it at home, be able to pause, take breaks. But, there is a lot for Marvel fans. There's a lot of characters. It's a fun movie. It's got great action. It's got great sound. It's got a great cast. So if you see it in theaters, like you might want to see it in theaters just because you get that experience as well. I think ultimately this is a rental in terms of my grading scale, but it's not a bad movie to see in theaters. So thanks so much for watching. If you liked this review, please like and subscribe to this channel. It helps me out a lot. Make sure all my new content goes straight to you. And please check out my other content. I've got other movie reviews, interviews, unboxing videos, and a weekly movie recommendation. Thank you so much.